Good evening. So I don't think I need to explain what Five Nights at Freddy's is. Chances are, if you're unlucky enough to stumble across this channel, you probably already know what FNAF is. FNAF has many characters, but not every character looks the most interesting. Some of them, I would argue, could go with a slight touch-up or a redesign. So that's what I'm going to be doing tonight. This video is going to be a lot more artsy than usual, so let me lay out the groundwork for exactly how this video is going to be and how it's going to be structured. This whole video is just for fun, and it's not meant to be taken seriously whatsoever. Not everyone is going to agree with some of the choices and things I do with each redesign, some of them not even counting as redesigns and more just being slight tweaks than anything, but you know, we'll get there. And that's fine. I'm not trying to one-up Scott Cawthon and his designs with this, because that's not really my place or my lane to be in. This is just a fun, stupid little art video and nothing more. I will be going through each of the games that I feel like covering and picking out characters that I feel could have a better design. I will try as hard as I can to stick with the original art style, techniques, and overall aesthetic of the official stuff, but obviously my crummy art style will be mixed in there as well. I will also explain my thought process for each design and things that I do and don't like about each design. There are three big characters in particular that made me want to make this video in the first place, so I will point out which ones they are as we go on, but chances are you probably already know who one of them is. I will also point out which characters I considered redesigning for this video, but ended up not putting them in for one reason or another. So with all that being said, let's get it on.
There's nothing.
Thank you, son.
I feel like almost all the characters' designs were spot on with the first entry in the series. The only character that I even considered for a second redesigning was Golden Freddy. But if I'm being honest, I feel like the design is already way too iconic to change, at least for what I set out to do for this video and what the rules for this video are. And I feel like there's no reason to change it, so I'm not. Even if it's just a Freddy recolor that's positioned slightly differently. And for this video, I typically give most of the recolors a glow up. But anyways, let's get started for real this time.
Fuck, you digging in me, you digging in me, you digging in.
For the first redesign, we've got Shadow Freddy. So for all the more ghost-like and non-physical characters that I'm covering in this video, I will be giving them a black haze and smog around them. So get used to that, because the first handful of characters will have that. Despite its really simple design with it just being a Golden Freddy retexture, I still really like this design, and you will hear me say that a lot in this video. In fact, pretty much most of the characters' designs in this video I think are pretty damn good. I just think there could be a little bit more to them. But the design is already good. I really like the color purple. Two redesigns are more of a touch-up than anything. Hell, maybe even first three, but we'll get to that. So stick with me here because the first two are going to be boring. But anyways, let's see what I spat out. The most immediately noticeable changes are the floating wires and wider mouth. I made the mouth wider because I think it gives a slightly more uncanny effect to it, making it feel more spooky and ghostly. Same reason goes for the floating wires, because he's a ghost. At least I think he is. Another thing that's different is the microphone no longer having that long thing at the end of it, instead opting for a more circular end, if that makes any sense. Although I kinda wish I just got rid of the microphone entirely now, just to differentiate him a little bit. There is also no longer a visible endoskeleton beneath the suit, for the most part, instead making the suit blend into itself because spooky. You will also see the floating wires and wider jaw carried over to other ghostly characters. Some of the things I don't like about this design is that I think the legs and feet are either positioned weirdly or are just too small, and I don't really care for the way the smog looks here. I fixed it a little more with the other ones, but the smog here is just meh. I also feel like I should have gone with a more darker and deeper purple to stay more in line with the original design. Here it just looks too bright and soft. And I also made an eyeless version because why not? Anyways, I think that's it for good old Shadow Freddy here. Overall, I think he's a very underrated character in my opinion. Again, I really like the shade of purple he's got. But let's get on with the last character for FNAF 2 here. Next up, we have good old RWQFSFASXC. Oh boy. So this guy has fans, at least I think he does, and this is probably much more of a substantial redesign than the previous, maybe, but kind of the same nonetheless. The first big change is that he's a lot less animatronic-like, even though he is still somewhat based off of Toy Bonnie, mostly. I wanted his body shape to look more unique, which is why I got rid of the creases in between his limbs and other parts of his body. similar to Shadow Freddy. I have the ears more off-centered and cocked over here too. The body is overall a lot more thin and the cheekbones are not as protruding as the original design. The mouth is a lot bigger and the entire body is a lot more blurry to give it that spooky ghost feel. Although I do have a non-blurred version as well. I also imagine him being slightly taller than Toy Bonnie for some reason. Although maybe in the games he is too. I don't know. For the things I don't like about this redesign, I honestly feel like it's a little too generic, at least to me. I feel like I could have done a little something more, but what I have here is fine. Overall, I think the design is fine. To be fair, this is what I had to work with here, and yeah, the original design is very simplistic, and I didn't want to stray too far away from it. But still, I feel like this is a decently sized departure from the original design, for the most part. And as for my thoughts on both of these redesigns, the characters that I had to work with here were both very simple, but I tried my best to do something here with them, and I feel like they both turned out just fine. Nothing too special, nothing too crazy, pretty mediocre at best maybe, but overall fine nonetheless. This more felt like a warm-up round more than anything, just starting out with simple characters before getting into the other stuff. If I were to choose my favorite out of this batch of redesigns, I would have to go with RWQFSFA-SXC. I cannot keep saying that name, but it could really go both ways. Anyways, on to the next game. Oh boy, it's time to plunge our way into the baby puke green fart factory of the FNAF 3 location and characters. For this, I have decided to do all the Phantoms because they're pretty much all recolors. Very cool recolors, but recolors nonetheless. For the first one on the chopping block, we have Phantom Freddy. So first things first, I try to replicate the texture that all the Phantoms have the best I can. And the second biggest design gimmick here is the more melty and burnt aesthetic. They already have a burnt up aesthetic, but I decided to go full throttle and made their animatronic suits all melty, especially with the characters introduced in the second game, since I've personally always viewed the Phantoms as being representative of the fire that's yet to come, even if they are just hallucinations. It's a ghostly guy, so black smog in the background, wide jaw, floating wires, you know the drill. I reused the Phantom eye texture for all the Phantoms because why mess with Peak? His bow tie is completely covered by his massive jaw, but it's still there. You just can't see it. This isn't a great example of the melted aesthetic, but trust me, it gets way worse the further we go. I specifically wanted the first three characters to be less melted since they're the original FNAF 1 characters, even if they're the withered designs or not. And I wanted to make the more toy-like characters from the second game more melted. I also removed Freddy's microphone here as well because he doesn't need that shit. I also made his missing leg slightly more detailed because yes, he has a missing leg. I also have wires hanging out and the endoskeleton leg is cut off with a more sharpened bottom at the end of it. Personally, I feel like it looks a bit better than this. For the things I don't like about this design, I feel like his position or stance is more leaned over than it needs to be. I feel like he needs to be more straightened up. Overall, I feel like it's a pretty mediocre Freddy redesign on my part. I don't know, maybe I'm just not good at drawing Freddy. Although this is the first of the Phantoms, and personally I feel like almost all the other ones are better. So with that being said, let's get into the next one. Next up, we got the classic watermelon, and finally one of our first substantial redesigns. Well, substantial enough for this point of the video. So let's see what I got. So this is much more crinkly looking, and I tried to give her a slightly more unique body shape compared to the original just being a retexture of the FNAF 1 Chica model. I also added some additional withering just to add that extra touch. A touch of what, you might ask? I don't know, crap. I also removed the suit part of the hands, revealing more of the endoskeleton underneath, as well as removing the left foot, revealing the sharp endoskeleton part underneath that. Kind of like a peg leg, which looks really goofy on this, but given how the character works in game, you will never even know it's there. Hypothetically speaking, of course. The head has also been slimmed down a bit. For the things I don't really like about it, it's not green enough for my taste. Not watermelon-y enough, and the shading looks a bit off in certain areas, especially the hands. In fact, I feel like I could have done the hands a bit better, but overall, I'm surprisingly proud of this design. Oh, and I also have a gray version of it as well, referencing the arcade camera frame of her, you know, for the funnies. Phantom Foxy. You know, I kind of like this one, actually. Maybe. This guy looks like he has to take a shit, and I do too, so let's get through this as quickly as possible here. It looks mostly the same. for the most part. There's a little less red in his design, and more of a booty hole brown, if you will. I have one ear slightly tipped over, and for some reason I switched the eyes around. It doesn't really matter though, because there's no eye patch. It's kind of hard to tell on the original, but I just jumped that gap and removed the eye patch altogether. You're welcome. I tried to play off the noticeable endoskeleton mouth beneath his, well, mouth by giving him a second set of teeth in that hole of his, just because it's a hallucination ghost thing, and I'm being loose with the rules with them. That's why the teeth are so ungodly white compared to everything else. All that being said, I feel like this design is very close to the original, strikingly so. But the original looked pretty good even if it was just a retexture, so yeah. But I also feel like I tried to copy the goofy stance that he has a bit too much, and it looks a little awkward here, so there's that too. But that's it. Up next we have Sir Phantom Balloon Fickleforth Boy II. If I'm being honest, I actually think this is my favorite one out of all the Phantoms, aside from maybe the puppet, but that's just because it's the puppet. I don't know what it is about this guy that makes me like him so much, but he seems more serious. He's got that charm about him, probably because of his lack of balloon or sign, and those iconic phantom eyes giving you that stare down. Not to mention that his jump scare has his mouth extend to an uncanny degree. There's some serious spooky potential here with this guy, but perhaps I'm reading too much into it. I mean, it is a Balloon Boy variant at the end of the day, but I want to try and translate that regardless. So here it is. It's fundamentally the same, but since he's a more plasticky looking character, I melted him down a little bit because I cannot keep my hands off of those gooey goobers. His mouth, like all the other Phantoms, is wider than usual. However, I feel like it's more noticeable and prominent with him. If this design were to have a jump scare or something like that, his mouth would widen further, I guess. But aside from all that, there isn't really much else to talk about here. I mean, I could have made his clothes a bit darker. It's a little too bright here for my taste. But aside from the whole melted thing, it's pretty standard. But you know, why fix what ain't broke? And before you ask, well, why is he in the video if he ain't broke? It's to keep him in line and consistent with all the other Phantoms. And because you can't have one without the other. You piece of shit. Overall, I'm kind of proud of this thing. It might even be my favorite out of all the Phantoms that I've done here. But on to the next one, and this one kind of sucked to do. Phantom Mango. You know I love Mango, but man, does it suck to draw him sometimes. She's just kind of complicated to draw, in general, kinda. And this one took a while. So, did it pay off? Not really. I went with the melted aesthetic yet again here, although to a lesser extent with this one because it's more endoskeleton than plastic. She's got the same kind of double mouth thing that Foxy has, and the lower jaw of the endoskeleton head is slightly crooked. Some parts of the endoskeleton are sharpened and more busted up. But as for the negatives, the lighting and shading is very off here. The shadow in Smog is way too black and it's hard to even make out what's going on. And the worst part is that either the legs are positioned weirdly or they're way too small. It makes the whole thing look goofy. In fact, it kind of pulls down the whole design, at least for me. So overall, this one was rough at best. At least in my opinion. I think this is the worst one so far, at least to the standard of the Phantoms. Is it my fault for letting this all happen, and should I have gone through more quality control kind of things with these? Yeah. But enough looking at this abomination that I have created. Let's get into the last one for the third game. For the last one, we have the Phantom Migraine himself, the Phantom Puppet. I like Phantom Puppet, but that's probably because I just like the puppet. And this redesign is disturbingly similar to the original. In fact, I'd call it more a slight tweak than anything. But he is slightly melted in certain areas, and his mouth is wider. He's probably dirtier too. But I did make a second version, although you can't really see it well in this picture, so I made a sketch to accommodate for that. His mouth is all melted closed. I think that's a pretty cool idea. I have definitely seen someone do this before though. I just don't remember who it is. But yeah, that's Phantom Puppet for you. This game by far has the most amount of redesigns out of any of the games here. In fact, I did literally everyone for this game except for Springtrap, of course. If I were to choose my favorite out of the bunch though, I would probably go with Phantom Balloon Boy. You just can't go wrong with him. But you know what? I like the Phantoms a lot. I think they're very interesting and underrated, and we need more Phantom love out there in the world. But I'm also glad to be moving on from the grime time surprise that was this aesthetic and game. So on to the next game.
First night is never usually that bad in any of the games, so I'll play through. It's always when I'm saying something.
Now we're on to my favorite game in the entire franchise, FNAF 4. For the first redesign, we got Jacko Bonnie. I like the Jacko animatronics, but they are just recolors, and I wanted to use the kind of gimmick that Grim Foxy has with the bigger hook by exaggerating some small features on their design, as well as the fire stuff, I guess. So here it is. Alright, I'll get to the fingers in a bit, but let me explain some other smaller things first. The snout portion now has a ton of tiny little holes in it because I thought it looked funky. The orange of his entire body is now a lot more of a yellowy orange, compared to the original's muddy, darker orange. One of the ears is missing its casing and is now cocked over a bit as well. I tried to achieve the same fire effect, but it came out looking a little off, but it works for the most part. It gets the point across. But for the things that don't kind of work for me in retrospect, the legs get too tiny around the feet, making the whole thing look weird and goofy. It's just too slim. The color is also a little too yellow. It should be more of an orange. However, the biggest design quirk about this whole thing is the long fingers. I tried to exaggerate the fingers, and it looks fine enough, but I'm not as proud of it as I thought I would be. I don't know, something about it just looks off. Maybe they should be a little shorter. Maybe they make the design look goofy. I don't really know how to feel about them. Overall, I think this redesign is okay at best. I know it feels funny that I'm saying this about my own designs that I'm presenting in this video right now, but I don't know. Anyways, on to the next one. Up next we got Jacko Chica. My opinion on this one is kind of the same as the other dude. So here's the redesign. Pretty standard and in line with the original. However, some of the things I changed is the removal of the "Let's Eat" text on the bib because I forgore. The mouth was also made larger and more open because I felt like it. I do like the effect that I achieved with the second row of teeth inside. I guess the body's also slightly slimmer too, and the pumpkin isn't really here because I feel like that would get in the way of the actual Chica design that I want to show off. Speaking of the pumpkin, for all you pumpkin fans out there, I also have that too, kind of here as a joke. And I also didn't really feel like leaving it out, so yeah, there he is. Some of the small things I changed about him was the different uneven mouth shape, some chipping on the eyes, and a longer, spikier, spookier stem, because spooky. I also changed the color to more of an actual orange color compared to the weird orangey green dookie color of the original. Yeah, I basically just drew a pumpkin. Both of these were fine, I guess. But the next one should be slightly more interesting. Up next we have Nightmare Mangle. This is one of the three that I was talking about that kind of inspired this video, because the original design just kind of looks boring and Most of the parts are obviously just recolors and mishmash pieces from Nightmare Foxy, and it looks like a Nightmare Mangle fan design more than anything. So let's fix that by making a Nightmare Mangle fan design. Starting with the head, I made the pink part of its face look almost sprayed or painted on, as well as taking that small crack in its head and giving it some air a bit. By that I mean splitting the head open around the eye. I also kinda like what I did with the endoskeleton mouth underneath. It looks pretty spooky. Moving on to the rest of the body, you can see I just added some more shit to it, and also added some spiky ends to the limbs, just to make the whole thing feel like even more of an exaggerated amalgamation of the original Mangle design, which is what the original Nightmare Mangle design should have been. At least in my opinion. Aside from some weird bullshit lighting stuff, I think this design is pretty alright and I'm still pretty proud of it, even if it was a complex pain in the ass to do. It's probably my favorite out of the bunch for FNAF 4 here, and potentially up there as some of my favorite from this video. For the characters that I considered for a redesign, I first considered the Frettles. The reason why I didn't go with them is because they honestly feel unique enough. Each of them even have their own unique withering, which I think is pretty neat. Not a lot of people probably notice. Then there was also Nightmare Balloon Boy. The reason why I didn't for him is because I just like him enough. Plain and simple, even if he does look a little silly. And lastly, Nightmare. My thought process behind redesigning him was that, oh, it's a recolor. It should be changed. Even though, in retrospect now, he feels unique enough and has a unique aura to him, so that's why I ended up leaving him be. So that's all the redesigns for the fourth game, and like I said before, I think Nightmare Mangle is the best one here. Man, I love FNAF 4, such a fun, spooky game, and it also has this thing, which I love so much. Anyways, on to Sister Location. For the first redesign for Sister Location, we have Electrobab. This fucking thing. I know this thing has its fans, maybe, but like, I don't even know if this thing is canon. She is literally just a biddy bab, but with glowing yellow eyes and is always rendered in dark bluish lighting. So here's what I did. Yeah, I basically just made a withered biddy bab. One of the most apparent changes is the lack of casing on the hands, as well as some of the plating being missing from certain parts of her body. The weird split face plating that every single sister location character has for some reason, like seriously, these are children's entertainment robots, but who am I to question the genius of William Affballs? Anyways. Yeah, the plating is slightly sliding off a bit, as well as the mouth now permanently hanging open. The eyes are now also slightly glazed over, having the pupils being more faded, like they were just flashbang. I also made the bluish lighting thing that she's always rendered in a now permanent color palette for her. Aside from some weird lighting issues, which is a thing that can be said about pretty much every redesign for this video, but that's probably more of a me problem than anything. It is. I think this redesign is pretty decent, in my opinion. I feel like I stepped it up a little bit from the original design, but then again, the original design was literally nothing, so yeah. The fact that I could somehow talk for this long about fucking Electrobab is something, but I've kind of warmed up to him, I guess. Anyways, on to the next and last redesign for this game. This one might be a little controversial because I think this is a popular enough character, maybe, but a little bit. Yeah. It's just a Funtime Foxy recolor. So here's the redesign. The most immediate change is the vest. I stole that idea from that bitch-ass racing game that I'm forgetting the name of. Okay, I'm not forgetting it. The name is 5 Laps at Freddy's. I just wish I didn't remember. Personally, I think the vest adds to the design a bit more. There are also some smaller changes like the tail shape and little parts of the head, as well as the removal of the eyebrows that appear in some later renders and models of the character, because the original render did not have them, and it just looks better in my opinion. But it is mostly pretty close to the original design. If anything, I feel like the original design just needed some small little touches to differentiate it a bit. The biggest issue I have with my own design is that the body is a bit too T-shaped compared to the original. Just looks a little off in retrospect, but yeah. Pretty standard, not much to write home about. For the two characters that I considered for this game, I once considered Yendo for a bit, but ended up dropping it very quickly because I just like him enough. He's just so chill like that. I also considered the mini-rena group. I think it's pretty obvious as to why I didn't go with it. It's just a group of mini-renas. Why would you change the original mini-rena? It's already good. Not much to really say there. Overall, I think these designs were pretty alright. I think the Electrobab redesign was the better one of the two. And that's all I really have to say about it, because it's sister location. And that's it. On to the next game. And this next game is going to be interesting.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth. If you still even remember that name. But I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to receive a gift. Nor have you been called here by the individual you assume.
Peter, it's 4 in the morning. Come to bed.
Although you have indeed been called. You have all been called here. Into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection, and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit. A maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach. But you will never find them. None of you will. This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. I am remaining as well. I am nearby. This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still, and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, friend. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms, the way you lifted others into yours. And then, what became of you? I should have known you wouldn't be content to disappear. Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It's time to rest. This ends, for all of us, in communication.
For the first and only redesign for pizzas, you already know who the fuck it is, it's Crabtrap. Of course, this is the second of the three I mentioned that inspired me to make this video. Just look at it. We all know it's bad. We all know it's fucked up. We all know it's ugly. So I'm gonna have to go slightly more in depth than the others, since I didn't just change the base design, but also the corpse inside, because the whole thing is just messed up. Certain parts of the suit just don't match the original peak Springtrap design, which it should have in my opinion. The forehead is way too big. Some of the proportions are weird in some areas, and the bone lips and bone ears, dear God. So here's what I came up with. The overall shape is a bit more similar to the original Springtrap, especially the head. One of the endoskeleton ears were made a bit bigger compared to the weirdly small original one. The sharpened, broken bone piece on one of the arms was made longer, and was also made a joint. The chest was opened up a bit to show off more of the gutty works inside. The suit part of the feet were completely removed to show the endoskeleton feet. One of the endoskeleton legs is going straight through his leg bone, cracking it open and splitting it in half. Yikes. I also added some more endoskeleton parts to the body, as well as a visible spine and cracked ribs. His piece of the suit for the jaw has also fallen off, revealing parts of the bone underneath. However, this isn't where this design ends. Like I said, I also redesigned the corpse inside, so let's see that. The design is overall a lot less bulky and a lot less chimp-faced. The original looks like a Neanderthal. The cursed bone lips and ears are now finally gone, having a slightly more realistic skull. Just slightly. Certain pieces of the flesh and intestines are being held up by shattered bone pieces and rib bones. Keep in mind this is all being contained within the suit, which is why some of the stuff hangs out the way it does. Overall, yeah, it's pretty much just a corpse. Something out of fucking Half-Life 2. The only real complaints I have for both of these designs is that I feel like the lighting in some parts is weird, making it look darker than what it should be, as well as the skull not really staying proportionate to actual human skulls, with the cheekbones protruding a bit too much. But it still looks better than the original, so yeah. But then again, that's not a very high bar to cross. The only character that I considered for a redesign for a singular second was Lefty. But I feel like Lefty is too much of an iconic design to change, and it works a little too well for a simple recolor, so I didn't change it. Overall, I think this redesign is probably one of the best ones I've done for this entire video, and it might be my favorite for this video, although I'm still undecided. You know, I think I've weirdly warmed up to Scraptrap's design a little bit more for some reason. I don't know, he's just so ugly, yet has that weird charm about him. I just can't put my finger on it. But we still have one more game and one last redesign for this video. So, on to the last one. Oh, security breach, security breach, security breach, ruin. This game has its problems. It is rough. For the last redesign, we have Vanny. This is also the last of the big three that I mentioned that inspired this video. I do not like this design or character. They're both really, really boring to me. And the character itself is just such missed potential. The design could have been a lot creepier, but it just came out looking to me. This promotional art makes the character look better than what she does in game, so I'm going to be using that. So, let's see what I spat out this time. The most immediate thing that jumps out, at least to me, is the dirtier and more rugged suit, as well as the goofed out eyes on the mask, trying to add to that unsettling weird factor. I also gave her her knife back from that promotional image. I know giving a knife to a character is kinda goofy now, but I think it's kinda funny how they removed it in order to make the game more kid-friendly, even though it's a horror game. She kinda just prances around like a jackass in the actual game, and I feel like giving something else to her to make her look more threatening would have just been better, so here's the knife. The bow tie is also slightly cocked over a bit here. I also wanted to try and give her the aesthetic of the suit has worn down so much over time that she had to replace certain parts and pieces of the suit with other pieces from other suits, if that makes sense. I don't know, it was a fun idea in my head. Aside from some questionable stains and some weird goofy proportions, there isn't a whole lot I can say about this. I mean, it is Vanny at the end of the day, and I tried my best to make her a little more interesting. But I feel like I say that about most of the designs in this video. Oh well. The slight tweaks I feel improve on her original design, so yeah, fun. The big two that I considered for this game were Burn Trap. The reason why I didn't go with him is because honestly, I feel like this design isn't that bad. I know a lot of people don't like it, and it has its issues, but still, I think it's decent enough to keep my grimy hands off of this burnt sponge. And it's a hell of a lot cooler looking of a design than Scrap Trap. The other one was Mexus, if I'm saying that right, from Ruin. The reason why I initially wanted to do him is because I think he could have looked a little cooler and a little more intimidating, even though the color scheme of the original is pretty neat, and I like blue. It also doesn't look as spooky as it could have been. However, I feel like that is an overall problem that plagues almost all of the characters from Security Breach and Ruin, and I feel like that's an issue that's too big for me to cover in this video, so yeah. But I think it's time to finally wrap this video up now.
Boy, what the oh, nah, bro. This... What the...
Overall, I feel like this was a very fun video for me to make, even if it took a while and even if some of the redesigns gave me crap for a little bit. But man, even if the FNAF community goes through so much shit and eats itself all the time, even with all the bullshit controversies and some of the newer games being questionable in their quality at best, even with how ass the movies are, even with the fanbase of FNAF being one of the most toxic and terrible communities there are, I still love Five Nights at Freddy's to death. What can I say? I love my silly robot bear game with the funny purple man and this amazing, beautiful thing. Ooh. No matter how bad and deplorable the community gets, I won't ever stop loving this game. It's just been with me for a long time, and with Secrets of the Mimic being peak, I think the franchise could be heading in a good direction, but I digress. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment if you liked it, or leave a comment if you didn't like it. I am always open to criticism, so I can improve on my content, as long as you're not a dick about it. This is a bit of a different video from the 3 other videos that I've put out, and yes, I understand my upload schedule is god-awful, but I'm still trying. I know I probably sound like a child, and I know my microphone is pretty shit right now, but what can you do? Things to improve on in the future, I guess. I will be posting all the redesigns in this video to my Tumblr, so go check that out there if you want. Thank you all so much for watching, hope to see you in the next one, and good night.